Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to Somewhere in the Middle with Michelle Berard. I'm your host, Michelle Berard, founder and CEO of Michelle Berard LLC. And I'm really happy to share this hour with you, where we examine all those places where spirit meets life and the joys and challenges that may bring. You guys know I like to start by thanking Ms. Beverly Black and Tribe Family Channel for helping me create this space for us. Tribe Family Channel is home to an assortment of thought-provoking shows that explore life, spirit, business, and culture, including The Woman at the Well, hosted by Ms. Beverly Black herself. Somewhere in the Middle was born on Tribe Family Channel, and we have grown onto our own platform, but we are ever grateful and loyal to our roots. To paraphrase an African proverb, we are here only because we stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. I want to say thank you to my guest on the April 19th, 2024 show, author Terry M. Brown. You can connect with Terry at her website, terrymbrown.com. If you missed that show, make sure you listen to the replay. You can find our complete show archives, including the April 19th show, at the somewhereinthemiddlepodcast.com. I also want to shout out Bruce George of the Genius is Common movement, which encourages all of us to embrace our inner genius and share it with the world. This is an essential message, and I hope you will share it with the young people. But it's not just for kids. We adults sometimes need to be reminded that the world needs our genius. Learn more about the Genius is Common movement at www.geniusiscommon.com. Now, this month's guest is a seasoned writer with an impressive career. Peter Davidson is the author or co-author of 30 books published by McGraw-Hill Book Company, Perigee Putnam Publishers, Haworth Press, Sweet Memories Publishing, and Northwestern Publishing. His works include fiction, nonfiction, college textbooks, and children's picture books. For more than 2 decades, Davidson was one of America's most active writers' seminar presenters. For more than 2 decades, Davidson was one of America's most active writers' seminar presenters, having presented 637 one-day seminars in a 15-state area from Minnesota to Tennessee and Colorado to Illinois. Davidson is also a songwriter, and one of his songs was used in a television series in the Netherlands. Davidson has owned several small businesses, including a professional recording studio. He also has worked as a real estate salesman and taught college business courses. Whatever else Davidson was doing in his life, he always kept on writing. So I'd like to welcome Peter Davidson to Somewhere in the Middle with Michelle Berard. Peter, thank you so much for being on the show with me.
Michelle, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, I am really excited because you are a prolific author. You have written plenty of books, and I think you've got a really interesting story. So I like to start my interviews with 2 questions, and if it's okay with you, I'll ask you those now.
Sure.
Peter Davidson, who are you, and how did you become who you are today?
Well, I was raised on a farm in southern Minnesota where we learned to work hard and long, and also we were kind of isolated. We're a few miles from a small town, so learned to do a lot of things on my own. If I have any creativity at all, I attribute it to growing up on the farm where I had to make my own fun. I built my own toys. I built a fort out in the woods and kind of learned to play by myself and do things by myself and create things. So that was kind of my beginning. I graduated from college at age 21 with a degree in business. And where I got my interest in writing was during my freshman year of college. I had a few professors that gave me some nice comments on some of my papers I turned in. So that was really good. But I think more than that, I wrote to some of my new friends that I'd made in college during the summertime. And they'd write back and say, gosh, I really enjoy your letters. They're fun to read and so on. And I thought, gosh, that's pretty nice. As a youth, I always had a paperback in my pocket. And I would read every chance I got. So I liked the idea of reading. I liked the idea of books. So the idea of writing someday, when I had the time to do that, was something that really came to me at a fairly early age, about age 18. I graduated from college with a master's degree at age 24, and then I entered the workforce. And that's soon after that, the point where I started doing some writing on a part-time basis and trying to find my way along the way.
So, first of all, you mentioned so many things that are really interesting from a time perspective, because things have changed a lot, not just how you live on a farm, probably. I've never lived on a farm, so I don't know, but I imagine it's different just from that. But the time aspect, you used to write letters. We used to write letters before all this internet and email and so forth. So talk to me about the letter writing experience and what that's like, exchanging information over periods of time with people.
Well, it took a matter of some time. You'd write a letter, put it in the mail, and the recipient would get it maybe 3 or 4 days later, and they'd read it. And by the time they got around to writing something, you maybe hear from them a couple of weeks later, or who knows how long it would take them to respond. So that was the way things always were, just in personal communication. And the thing that was really interesting to me in the writing, I maybe should not admit this to you, but when I first started writing, that was before computers were created for general personal use. So I was using a typewriter, as writers did back then. And more importantly than that, it was before photocopy machines. So how do you make a copy if you don't have a photocopy machine? And we would use, everybody did, made carbon copies with carbon paper. And you could make one really good copy. You could get a second copy that was fair, and maybe a third copy you could barely read. And the horrible thing was, if you made an error, which I would frequently, then you'd have to erase each of those copies, the original copies, hope that they lined up properly again when you put them down. They would not often. It was a mess. But that was the era when I started writing, and that people of my generation started at. When the photocopy machine came in, I really think it was maybe a greater blessing to writers than the computer, because those carbon copies were just a horrible mess.
And I remember carbon copies because that's what we had when trust me, I'm not that young. But no, what I really think is fascinating about writing letters is the quality of the communication. Did you find that the quality of the communication was richer writing letters than maybe sending emails today?
Well, they're very personal, and that most of the time a person would write them in their own handwriting. And so you give the personal touch. If you made an error and you're writing to somebody that you know pretty well, where they won't mind if you cross something off and rewrote it or something along that line, so that they would have real character, probably compared to now. And in that era, typewritten letters were pretty much used for business purposes, and personal letters were handwritten letters. Now, of course, people send a lot of, text messages and a lot of email messages, all of which are in print.
Has any of that new technology or the way that we communicate now influenced your writing over time? And if so, in what way?
Well, it sure has. The computer has made writing so much easier, in that when I was writing and using just a typewriter, I would actually start by writing my first draft in longhand. And then my editing would be that, this paragraph should be here. I would circle it, draw an arrow up there, and you go here and you go here. And then when I got them all sorted out, a lot of things crossed off and got things sorted out. Maybe I'd also say insert page 12A here and have all those sort of things. Then, because typing, especially using the carbon paper and before the photocopy machine, was such a task, when I finally had it where I thought it was my final draft that I did in longhand and with all these arrows and things, then I would type the final draft. So that was quite a task, quite a procedure. And it was the only procedure that we knew at that time. So that's just the way it was. Then when the computers came along, what a blessing that is. You want to move this over here, copy it and paste it. It's very, very simple, and it's so easy to correct errors and so on. So that part was an advantage. One thing, Michelle, that I'd look at as maybe a little bit of a disadvantage was back when it was really, really hard to be a writer. It kept a lot of people out of doing it. I mean, they just did not have the interest in putting that much time and effort and so on. But now that it is really quite easy with the computer, photocopy machine, and those things, it's much, much easier to turn out material. So anybody that's got a story to tell can do it quite easily. So tremendous competition out there.
Well, I think it's great in a way because, yeah, there's more competition out there, but everybody's got a story, and technology has kind of democratized that. How long did it take for you to put a book together before you started using computers?
It would take longer than with a computer, and it would really vary. The first major book that I had published was kind of an interesting story. One of my good friends was an accountant, and he called one Saturday morning and said, "Hey, we haven't had a chance to visit for a while. I'm going out of town to visit my client, Cliff. Why don't you just ride along? We'll be back in a couple hours." And as you know, accountants are very tight-lipped. He didn't tell me why we're going, what he's going to do there, any of those things. We're just going to see Cliff. And we pulled up in front of this. We went to a small town about 30 miles away, pulled up in front of this tavern, Cliff's Tavern. And he was not open for business. It was about 10 o'clock in the morning. But we walked in, and this guy came running from back of the place, and he yells, "Do you think I'm going to jail?" And I thought, this is going to be fun. And Cliff had every reason to wonder whether he was going to jail. He had not filed income taxes for 5 or 6 years. And then my accountant friend and I hauled boxes and bags of his financial data out of his office to my friend's car, and it was in chaos. I mean, it wasn't like this is this year 1 and year 2 and year 3. It was just all mixed together, just thrown in there. And at that time, I thought, what a great way this would be for a college accounting student simulation, a project where they were to do the books for a business. However, instead of everything being nice and neat, like all of the other simulations on the market at that time, all of the information is there, but it is chaos. It is a mess. And you maybe have never heard the term shoebox accounting. A shoebox accountant is a term that accountants refer to as probably an individual or a small business operator that all year long takes all the invoices, receipts, check stubs, and all those things, just throws them in a shoebox or a drawer or a basket or something. And then at income tax time, they dump them on the kitchen table and sort things out and try to make sense out of it. So this was the first shoebox accounting simulation that was ever published. It was published by McGraw-Hill of New York, and they had it on the market for 25 years.
Wow.
So that was, and I think back to the growing up on a farm and trying to develop my own fun and developing some creativity as maybe being the reason for being able to do this. But to answer the question you asked long before I started talking, I kept track of my time. I wrote the simulation in 16 hours.
Wow.
It just came to me. It just flowed. Everything flowed. But then I had to design business forms. And that took me well over 100 hours to develop the forms and so on. So I actually had something that was visual that I could submit to a publisher. And I got a very false impression of the publishing industry. I submitted it to one editor, one publisher, and they took it. Life does not work that way.
So did you find that your next books, it was maybe a little more challenging to get published?
Well, actually, once I got my foot in the door with McGraw-Hill, then that editor was talking to the college business mathematics editor and said, "I'm going to need to find a author to write a new college textbook." And the accounting editor said, "I know somebody." And that was me. Never in my wildest dreams did I ever think I would ever want to write a real college textbook. But when one of the world's great publishers knocks on your door and says, would you write a book for us? It sounded, especially when she said, you know, this could be your retirement program. I was, by the way, that was not true, but it was a good sales point. And so I did, and it was quite an experience for me. I found writing a textbook is definitely challenging, but it really, and there's a lot of creativity involved in it, how to say these things and present them so they might be interesting. A lot of little scenarios and word problems and things like that. But just a lot of work. You just grind out the material and you're kind of saying the same thing that other textbooks have said and trying to cover it and so on. So actually I did a number of, I think 3 different business mathematics textbooks for that publisher. So that got me going with them. And then things kind of snowballed from there. The business math editor and I became quite close. We talked on the phone virtually every day about the projects. And I, at the same time, had been writing a manuscript on my own called Earn Money at Home, How to Earn Money at Home, that a lot of people have an interest in, subsidizing their income by doing a little something here and there. And I just finished that manuscript and I told her about it. And she said, you know, I had lunch the other day at a interdepartmental lunch with the editor of the trade division that does the books for bookstores and so on. Let me tell her about it. And she did, and she said, I'd like to see it. So they accepted that. So I got into the shoebox accounting, went to the business math, went to then the trade division, books for bookstores around the country. So that book was on the market for 17 years.
Wow.
With McGraw-Hill and in bookstores all over the country. So that got me into a little bit different division of writing. And that maybe spoiled me too, because I found out later in life, things are not that easy.
Well, give me an example of one that wasn't so easy, if you want to put it that way.
Actually, Michelle, I have a box in the garage that has a label on it that says manuscripts that were never published and never will be.
Oh,
and
no.
I would guess that a lot of writers have such a thing. And I had some ideas that I thought were pretty good ideas that I would present to literary agents. And sometimes get a response and say that's a good idea, but I don't think anybody would buy this book, which is, of course, what a publisher is interested in. So I had a number of misguided things there. I had another one some years ago that before anything like this was on the market, I had a literary agent that had placed a book of mine called How to Sell Your House in Tough Times with Perigee Putnam, which is a major publisher too. And I came up with the idea that, you know, there's a lot of books on the market about how to do this and how to do that. And they're they're nonfiction books. They're almost like a textbook, however. What about if we had informational books that are written in a tongue-in-cheek, upbeat, kind of humorous style? All the information is there, but it's presented in a fun way. And I wrote my first, 60 pages or something in a proposal. And I think I called it The Nitwit's Guide to Investing. And I presented that to the editor. She said, oh my gosh, we cannot call people nitwits. There's not a publisher on earth that would publish this thing. And I took her word for it. About 10 years later, the dummy books came out. So I missed, I should have pursued it harder with other people, but things happen like that.
That's interesting though, because there's this concept of, you know, kind of missing a wave. Maybe you had the idea and, you know, it sounds like that actually happened to you with that. Are there any other kinds of manuscripts or anything that you started working on that later you said, wait, that was my idea?
My newest book that came out in June of 2022 is called Making Your Mark, Leaving a Legacy, and then a Grand Exit that'll have their tongues wagging. And it is a nonfiction book that is written in that style kind I was talking about, taking what might be a serious topic and taking kind of upbeat and so on, there have been other books on that topic out there, but nobody took the approach that I did of presenting things about the end of life, which is that grand exit I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of presenting all the information is there, the plans you have to go, that somebody has to go through, and all of those things. But I think every other book on the market presents them pretty much in a straightforward, educational, nonfiction type way, which is good. All the information is there. I presented the information in the form of a fictional account of this kind of lovable rogue former high school and college athlete, a former rodeo cowboy, a rancher, a good old boy that was trying to train a horse. He got bucked off, knocked unconscious, and trampled. He ends up in the hospital in tough shape, and the doctor gives him the word, you better get your affairs in order. And from there on, he and some of his buddies planned his grand exit. And he said, I want to go out with a flash. So that's how I presented the information there. So there's a lot of people who presented things on that very same idea, but I presented it a little bit differently, and people seem to have liked the way that was.
So is that considered fiction, or is it considered reference? What is the genre there?
Well, the nature of the book is how to make your mark on your friends, relatives, and on society, and how to leave a legacy for the future generations and so on. And even when you get the word that the end is near, a person can continue to make their mark in society, to build their legacy. And even as they are planning for somebody who's executing their final exit out of this world, they can continue to do those things. So it's a thing that continues on throughout, is kind of the nature of what that book's about and how that operates. But this would be, to answer your question, it really is a nonfiction book, but I used a fictional approach in addressing that difficult topic that nobody really likes to think about or plan about, but I presented in what some people said is a fun and humorous way to read the information.
I think that's wonderful. So do you typically, it sounds like you've only written nonfiction thus far. Is that true?
Started out, for books that got published, started out with that shoebox accounting practice set, then more textbooks, and along the same time, we got connected with McGraw-Hill, the trade editor, and did a number of books for the trade market. One thing I'm kind of proud of, by the way, is that after writing 3 college business math textbooks, I thought, I should write a book for the general public that takes math concepts, how to calculate interest rates and compare things, invest in the stock market and so on. So I wrote a book called Everyday Math Made Easy, and it's for the general public. So that was kind of a little crossover. And then what I had always thought of doing was writing fiction, kind of got caught up in the textbooks thing. I never intended to write them, but when they asked, well, would you write another book? I thought, well, that's a pretty good idea when somebody asks you to do that. But then eventually I wrote a novel that turned out really good. I thought it turned out pretty good. Had a literary agent and found 2 publishers that were interested, traditional publishers, in publishing it. And it is set in the Iowa's resort area called Okoboji, where my wife and I live in the summertime. It is a great summertime resort area with lakes and concerts and all sorts of things. So I wrote the first novel that was ever set in this community, and that really worked out really, really good. And after that, I was bit with the fever to write novels. And that's pretty much writing novels or things that are upbeat in a nonfiction way.
That's awesome. And so tell me about, say the name of the little town again, because it's a little hard for me.
It's a hard one to pronounce, and it is called Okoboji,
Okoboji. Okay.
Okoboji, but people confuse it with, in Florida, there is, what is it? It's not Okoboji, it's something very similar.
Yes, like Okinoki.
Okeechobee.
Okeechobee. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very confusing. It confused me too. So it is the Iowa summer resort area, and it is fun to live here, except the tourists overrun us in the summertime. But that's the reason we have all of the things going on, major concerts and things like that, that all of us get a chance to enjoy.
Okay, so what kind of, I mean, is that a mystery? Is it, thriller? What kind of story is that?
Well, I wanted it to be about the community area, but I started out in Beverly Hills, California, with a famous and rich actor who is disappointed and disgruntled with his fabulous but swamped life, where he's got a sleazy manager that's demanding, he's got smothering fans, and he decides he needs a break. And he decides he will decide to go wherever a map lands on the dart, dart lands on a map. So he puts up a map of the United States, he throws it, it lands on Okoboji. So he disguises himself, takes a circuitous route, ends up there in the middle of the summertime. So he's here and he gets involved in the summer culture. Of course, he finds a beautiful woman and falls in love with her, but he has a dilemma. By this time, the world has found out he is missing. And when he was throwing darts, he threw one through a window, broke a window in his house, and the glass is over. So people think he's probably been kidnapped. Maybe he's been murdered. So the world is hunting for this guy. He's here in Okoboji, trying to woo this lady. So that's the basic storyline.
That sounds like fun.
Well, I included in it about 50 locals. I put their names in, gave them a little role here and there. Some of them even had a little talking part. And this turned out to be a great sales technique. I had some of them that would grab people off the street and said, buy this book. I'm on page 39. I'll sign it for you.
That's beautiful. That sounds like so much fun.
Well, it was tremendous fun. And we had a local book signing where I rounded up about 30 or 40 of the locals. And there is a ballroom here where on Thursday nights, there are rock and roll concerts. And we had the book signing there. So we had a built-in audience of over 1,000 people to start with that were there. And then it almost got out of hand. I decided, as a little tip of the hat to all my characters, excuse me, I would buy them give them a few drink tickets. And so that may have not been the wisest idea, but it was fun. It was great. So we have like a book signing of 30 characters, and they're bringing people in. It was a pretty crazy time. One of the best times I ever had in my life.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So you have another book that's going to be coming out in 2023.
In 2023, and it is a novel, and I am really, really excited about it. It is called The Dish Dog, and it is a story about a stock market insider trading scheme that someone somewhere is perpetrating, and they have access apparently to inside information about a large number of major corporations in America, so that they know in advance when big things are going to happen that will drive the stock market price up in a hurry. And because they have this inside information, they can go out and buy stock at the current price. When the price goes up in 3 or 4 days, they sell, and they are apparently making millions. So through a slip of the tongue by a relative of one of the people involved in this, the FBI Fraud Intervention Department finds out about this. So they are trying to investigate and find who is running this scheme. And they figure because if somebody that has contact with so many different companies, it's got to be like a radio or TV investment guru, somebody that's a Pulitzer Prize winner, maybe a nationally known investment journalist. And this is the biggest insider trading scheme ever in the history of the United States. And the person who is assigned to be in charge is a brilliant young woman who graduated from high school with a 4.23 grade point average on a 4.00 scale, graduated from Stanford University in 3 years, and got her PhD from Harvard Business School at age 24, who becomes a forensic accountant with the FBI in New York City. And it is her task to lead the group that tries to uncover this scheme and determine who it is and to put them out of business.
Wow.
And it has a surprise ending. I've had a few friends read the manuscript and they like it. They like the surprise ending. So that book will, it's a 2023 edition, and it'll be the latest book that I will have out as of the end of 2023.
That's awesome. So you've run the gamut in your writing, going from really a program, an educational program, to textbooks, to nonfiction, to fiction. What advice would you give to someone who's just starting out, really wanting to write?
My advice would be, don't try to outguess the market where you think there's going to be some potential, but write what you know, write what you want to write, and try to learn as much as you can about doing that. If it sounds like, gosh, writing nonfiction is really a thing to do, but I really like to write fiction, I think they ought to write fiction. Learn all they can, and also to not expect maybe that the first thing they write is going to be a bestseller or maybe even get published. But if they keep at it, keep developing their skill, keep developing new ideas, looking for unique ideas, and those ideas can fall on you anytime. I think most writers probably, I wouldn't say steal the ideas from conversations, but let's say borrow them. If a friend happens to say something that's pretty clever, you might see a writer writing down a little note to make sure they don't forget that.
Well, just in our conversation, I got one that I'm like, I don't know, Peter, you may want to revisit this. You first told us about the guy running out of the building saying, do you think I'm going to go to jail? And I immediately thought that would be such a great start to a novel.
Well, it would be. And I don't know whatever happened to the guy. I'm sure that the accountant had to do some real serious talking with the IRS to get all the back taxes paid and so on.
Well, maybe that can be part of one of your next novels. Maybe you'll go back and think about that story and think, I wonder what could have happened.
Well, that's a good idea. Thanks for being my co-author.
All right, just remember that when it comes out and it's a major bestseller. That's all I want.
Okay. I got your name. I know where you live.
Awesome. Peter, how can people be in touch with you?
You know, the best way, I enjoy it if people contact me. I had a lot of people that will contact me with questions about writing or things like that. And I'm always pleased to be able to respond. And I would like to give you my email address, and they can just email directly to my personal email account. And that is Peter Davidson, PeterDavidson, followed by the digits 129 @gmail.com. Peter Davidson 129 @gmail.com.
Awesome. But they can also connect with you on Facebook, right?
Yes, on Facebook account. Have a Twitter account, but Facebook would be a good place.
Awesome. Peter, thank you so much for being on Somewhere in the Middle with Michelle Berard.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed visiting with you. It was a pleasant conversation.
Well, that's our show this month, guys. You can reach me online at michelleberard.com. You can also find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok as Urban Book Editor. Send me a note. I'd love to hear from you. Feel free to send in some topics you'd like us to cover on the show. Loyal listeners already know that June is my birthday month, so we take the month of June off. Our June 21st show will be an encore presentation of our 2020 interview with author and grant writing expert, Dr. Beverly Browning. You can find us once a month on Fridays at 5 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Mountain, 7 p.m. Central, and 8 p.m. Eastern at the somewhereinthemiddlepodcast.com. Let's continue the conversation. You guys be good, stay mindful, and remain prayerful. Peace and blessings, y'all.